I'll try and give you some context for where I'd like to take the discussion. And I know you're a pretty, I'm going to call it sophisticated audience, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on stuff, hopefully, that you know. I will try and convince you first that I do agree with Fayez. This is a wonderful period for retailers. We haven't had it in 7, 8 years. But the hallmark of great retailers is they use good times to restructure their business for the bad times, and they will come. So I'm going to talk to you about the importance of growth and where I think growth can come from. And then to go from that, and there's a bunch of things we could talk about in growth, but I'd like to focus on the importance of the front end of the customer journey, because I think we've spent a lot of time in the last few years on the loyalty side, and I'd like to argue that's pretty hoed ground. And if we're going to grow, we're going to have to look at the front end. And then the last point is this is all going to take place in an era of where machine learning and AI is starting to take off. And I want to talk a little bit about what's going to matter in terms of you taking advantage of that. Okay, so the good times. So this is a little piece of McKinsey research. It does a whole bunch of things. And essentially, the green line is people who haven't cut back on spending. And the gray bar is those that can. And we haven't seen anything like this in 10 years. And that's why anybody who's got their act together right now is enjoying positive comps. It tends not to last. So now's the time to start to think about where you're going to go to grow and strengthen your customer relationships. We know at one level where the spending is happening. It is happening in some different formats, but you'll notice the increase in spending that we're seeing is happening online, and the satisfaction rates actually are pretty good, which suggests it will keep going. Now, why is that a problem? The problem for many retailers is actually not their overall business. It's the fact that traffic is declining in their stores. I didn't say sales were declining. It's traffic is declining. And in a big fixed cost business, which retail is, if you get that continual 1% decline in traffic, it gets really hard for you to grow. So they'll roll that into the P&L side of the business. So the orange little circles are the profit by type of retail format in 2015. And the red little circles is the projected profit margin in 2021 before we start to do some of the things you're going to be talking about today. And with the exception of the DIY format, everybody is under severe pressure. Why is it occurring? You know the businesses you live in. Your traffic counts are going down in a fixed cost business. Your costs of being a multi-channel retailer are going up, and your technology costs are skyrocketing. And that just puts pressure on your profits. So why do we start to think about the folks in this room? Because to be honest with you, and Jared, you made this point a little bit about people playing the old game. What's happened in the last few years in retail? And the answer is we've taken cost out. So just ignore the right-hand side. Look at the bar over that side, and you will see the average decrease in costs, SG&A costs, as a percentage of revenue. And for those of you who've been in retail for a while, those are really good numbers. It's really hard to take costs out of a retail relative to sales. Okay? So those are actually some pretty impressive numbers. What's happened, though, is it's, as you can see on the right, it's flipped into prices not going up or going down. And so we're in this era where we've got to take advantage of the times we have to get ourselves ready to deal with some of these issues. So then the environment, and I'm sorry for the busy slide, my editing skills are not particularly good, but I want to point out 3 things to you about our consumer. Look in the bottom left corner, which is the consumers, and these are more sophisticated consumers, not income, but mindset. So 88% of them now trust online reviews as much as they trust personal recommendations. To give you a sense, trusting salespeople in a store is under 20. Look on the bottom right corner. You guys know this, how important people are demanding personalization, but I want you to connect that to what's in the top of that side, which is the little circle of 94% of these more sophisticated consumers walking away from a brand if they don't like the service. And it's just about the most important thing to remember. And the reason is that service is the wrong word. Experience is the right word. So as we're personalizing, we have to personalize at the same time marketing and experience. Marketing is experience, experience is marketing. You know that, but ask yourself whether that's actually what's happening. And some of the examples we saw, just because I shop a couple of them, I would say they're doing a pretty good job of it. Now, let's go forward. We need to grow. In this environment, what do we do? Well, the first is that we know this is why all of you are going to have jobs for the next few years. You were wondering if you would, and you will. And the reason is, look at the bar in the middle. This is a projection from McKinsey of where the growth is going to come from. Not absolute sales, but growth. Okay? So 42%, not surprisingly, is going to come from increasing online sales. 57% is going to come from digital programs driving offline sales. 1% of all growth, not 1% of sales, 1% of all growth is going to come from basically being in the right location and people walking by your store. Okay? That's the growth. E-commerce, digital marketing put together to a better experience. That is, of course, but it's where all the growth is. And if you believe we have to grow, then this is where you got to be looking. Personalization, I'm not going to spend any time on this. This is McKinsey numbers in terms of how much good personalization can be worth. I'm not going to, you guys know this, okay? But just whether you notice the left bar is the one we've been doing, improving marketing efficiency. The right three bars are where we got to go. We have to start to grow. And at retail, you only grow when you do things at scale. The little tests are nice, but they ain't going to help us. Okay, let me move on and talk about the environment going forward and what we're going to have to do. My first point I'm going to try and make to you is stop looking exclusively at loyalty. Exclusively. Loyalty is a big deal. It's not going to help you grow. It really isn't, and here's why. This is now, just trust me, when McKinsey does surveys, there's a lot of people in the survey, so it's a pretty robust database. This is now taking a whole bunch of categories and saying, when we saw people buy, how much of it was driven by shopping around and choosing a brand or being loyal. So go down the far end where it says mobile carriers. Not surprisingly, more, 80, 90% of it comes from loyalty. You get hooked into a carrier, you don't tend to shop around when the renewal happens. But now look at everything, in a way, up until financial services, and you start getting 50, 60, 70% of the purchases are occurring because people are shopping before they make the purchase. Okay, so if you're not in their shopping list, no growth. And growth is what we need. Now, you've all seen some version of this. It's been around for a decade or so, but it's just a way to think about the consumer decision journey. The little black ball is the initial consideration set. We're going to spend the rest of the discussion on that. You then have, from that, you get active evaluation, people looking at the different brands they have, they purchase, and then you have the experience they have, and you get loyalty occurring. Okay? Everybody more or less has a version of this. I want you to remember the way marketing was taught 15 years ago. It was a funnel. It was a funnel, right? Whole bunch of brands at the top in awareness, less brands in consideration, less brands purchase, less brands loyalty. Okay. Now, I want to show you some data, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because it's the core for why you need to be thinking differently. The line at the top called number of brands in ICS's initial consideration set. Okay? This is all, it's a combination of survey and purchase data, but very large. We're like 1 million plus in the sample. Okay? This is the number of brands that people are not reporting but actually used when we went through and looked at what they're doing. So it says, in financial services, when somebody's thinking about going to get a mortgage or going to get a credit card, on average, they have 1.4 brands, a couple brands. Why do they do that? Because they're also busy. So they weed out, they choose a couple, and then they evaluate them. Okay, so telecom, handsets, 1.5, sometimes it gets up to 2. Now look at the next line. This is the number of brands in that category. So 18 brands in financial services, 7 in handsets, a median of the story. Now, remember that. So then you can see the ratio below. 1.4 out of 18 brands are going to get into consideration. Is that a problem? I'm going to go back a slide. Yes, because 70%, 70% of the brands that were chosen were in the initial consideration set. So just think about this. Your financial services, I know many of you aren't, I'm choosing not to do your retail. There's 18 brands out there. If you get in one of the 2, you have a 70% chance of being purchased. If you don't, you've got a 30. You want to grow. If you're spending all your time on your loyal customers, you have no front end to your funnel, yet 70% of the decisions are being made because of that. That's why. I'm not saying get away from having good loyalty programs. I'm just saying there's a lot of pressure in companies. How many times have you heard it? Focus on our best customers. Do more for our best customers. Send them more emails. Send them more catalogs. And the problem is you don't grow. And if you don't grow as a retailer, you've got a big problem. So I'll give you one other page on this. Yes, I know there's Sephora people here. Yes, you're going to look like heroes. Just accept it. Everybody will love you. They'll buy you coffee. So imagine here what we're doing. We've done this across a whole bunch of brands, and it is a little older data, just because you have to have hindsight. So the ICS score, think of this as how strong you are in the initial consideration set. Okay? How often you get in that 2 brands or 3 brands. Okay? The next one is market share. What you'd love to see, of course, is that your, if you will, share of being in the initial consideration set is ahead of your market share. It would suggest you're going to grow. Okay, and if it's behind, it suggests it's not. So Sephora is a great example of someone who, this is 2015 data, at the time was double their consideration ratio relative to their share. And sure enough, off went the business. Department stores have had a little bit of a renaissance in the last couple of years, but look where it was in terms of the data a couple of years ago. We've all read about drugstores and some of the mass merchandisers, with the exception of some recent performance, and you can see back, in 15, early 16, they just weren't getting in the initial consideration set relative to their market share. And it was a precursor of trouble. And so the message I'd leave you with here is, and when I've been in conversations with other CMOs, it's like, just take a look at how you're spending your money. And are you spending enough on the front end of the funnel? And I would argue, when you look at your marketing programs, are they really understanding what it takes to get new customers or maybe lapsed customers, somebody that had an occasional visit with you, but you didn't put them in your loyalty program? Where is there an opportunity there? Last thing I want to do, just touch a little bit on the future of the AI world. All of this gets better and better and better if you can apply some of the machine learning techniques. I think you probably all recognize that. But the key to great machine learning is, in fact, the breadth and depth of data. The more you can train the machine before you start, and the more data it can use, the better it's going to be. And I'm going to give you two little pieces of unconnected data to try and get your juices going. The first, and my apologies, one of the other things that I do, there's a VC firm named Georgian Partners that is a big investor in Bluecore and very happy with it. So I chair their advisory board. Tyson's over as the board member here, is on it. This is the thing that we're looking at. So I apologize, I can't show you the real data for obvious reasons, so I've gone to stars, okay? So imagine on the one hand you've got, down at the bottom, growth rate. You know this, VC firms love high growth. That's why Fayez is up here, because Tyson's over there telling you how fast he's growing. On the other hand, you get the amount, the degree, the breadth and depth of proprietary data. And what I've got here is a group of basically up-and-coming technology firms and AI firms that we're valuing, and I just put in the stars of the value. Obviously, if you get in the top right corner, you've got lots of data, and you've got and you're growing fast, then you're going to be very highly valued. But look at how fast it drops off, like half, even though you're growing as fast, if you don't have the breadth of data. And why is that? Because the more we go into a machine learning environment, the more we are going to be able to just take advantage of a broad set of data, because the models and the machines are just better and better and better and better. But you have to have something to start. And you say, okay, I buy that. Maybe that works in all kinds of different ways. What about retail? And I want to share with you a couple of pages. I borrowed some from some friends at McKinsey. And this talks about where they think retail might go, and this concept that you may have heard of ecosystems and the way that they're going to connect retail to other businesses. So this is a busy slide. I want you to ignore the things on that side, and I want you to come to this bar called reinforcing healthy choices. I want you to picture, we all worry about this, if you were able to put together, managing privacy, of course, the data that an insurance company like Atma would have, what a drugstore would have, what might be, particularly on the new Apple Watch, with what you might get with some of the telemedicine things that are around. And compare that to what any individual player could do in terms of providing satisfaction, providing a great experience, and getting consideration. I'll give you one other one. If you go now to the left-hand side, if you think about adventure packages, imagine the data that REI plus Vail plus Airbnb would have if they could put that together in terms of what they could do for either your positive experience or, in fact, your ability to drive growth through consideration. Everybody goes, yeah, that's great. I'd love to be part of that. How are you going to get included? Why would any of these guys want to take your retailer and put it in? And the reason is because you've got better data. Okay, and I'm going to pause there. I'll just leave you with these three things. First, growth is what we need, and growth is going to be a combination of loyalty and consideration. You've got to be more in the consideration set as well as loyalty. I bet if you look at your dollars, you're spending way too much on loyalty. Second, you have to personalize. You know that, but in fact, data is the key to personalization. And lastly, if you wanted to watch companies, either as an investor or who you want to get connected to, look at people that have depth in vertical data. Okay, because that's actually, the people that are spread out all over the place, IBM Watson might be an example, those are not the people that are growing or going to grow. It's the depth in terms of consumer behavior around a specific type of shopping occasion. And so I know that's what you're trying to gather. I just reinforce that is what the future is going to be. And with that, thank you.